everyone, and welcome to another episode of the World of Wrestling podcast. I'm Slim. Once again, Carl couldn't join us. We're hoping he's back soon. A quick note is that I was going to put Double or Nothing on this episode, but I haven't had time to actually watch it yet, so it will be kicking off next week's episode of the podcast. But with all that out of the way, we will start with Raw. And Raw starts with a promo which is about Becky leaving. And then Orton comes out to start the show properly and says Edge is doubting himself in a proper wrestling match. Edge then comes out and says Orton didn't want to be a wrestler like Edge did, and now he's finally one of the greatest workhorses ever. Orton then yells at Edge to accept the challenge, and Edge accepts it. We then get a recap of what happened to Ray last week. Then Rollins is backstage and he says to Murphy that he had a revelation that he wants to tell the world. Commentary then gives us an update on Ray, and they say it's critical, but doctors need to wait for the swelling to go down to actually diagnose it. Rollins is then in the ring and says that you have to lose yourself to truly find yourself. Rollins says that without no darkness there can be no light, and Rollins found the light thanks to Ray. Rollins says that what happened to Ray was unfortunate but necessary. He talks to Ray directly and says that what happened to Ray was a blessing in disguise, and he says that Ray is welcome before Carrillo interrupts. Humberto Carrillo says that Rollins is a coward. Rollins says that he's not dressed for a fight, but Murphy is. So then we cut back to break, and Murphy and Carrillo are having a match, and it was a decent match. Murphy won by pinfall after hitting the Murphy's Law. Post-match, Murphy attacks Carrillo some more, and Black comes out to fend off Murphy, almost hitting Black Mass, but Murphy rolled out of the ring before he does. Backstage, Corbin is asking how the King doesn't have his own locker room. He also says Raw is shit because there's fingerprints on his crown, nobody bows down. If he wants food, he has to get it himself, and a whole bunch of other things. He also says to the ref that he's going to do his match with McIntyre tonight. He says to him that they're going to discuss how to ref the match. Liv Morgan has a promo, and she says that her mum is a hero. She says that a couple of weeks ago she had a match with Charlotte, and she learnt that she's just like her mother and will one day become Raw Women's Champ. Charlotte is out next, and she's doing her entrance, and while that's happening we get a video package showing what happened on SmackDown between Charlotte, Sasha and Bayley. Charlotte then has the mic and says that she's the hardest worker on all three brands. She then says that she's excited to teach Bayley that there are levels to being a champ, and she then calls out Ruby Riott. We then get Ruby Riott versus Charlotte. It was a decent match. Charlotte won by submission with the figure 8. Charlotte match. Backstage interview with Bobby Lashley and MVP next, and MVP says Lashley's going after clowns like Truth and Lana. He then says that he wants Lashley to think about being champ, and he wants Lashley to release Lashley before leaving. Yeah, right. It makes sense, sort of, because MVP says that he wants Lashley to release the proper Lashley before they leave. That's what that meant. We then have a look at the Street Profits versus Viking Raiders basketball game from last week, and we also see the start of the axe throwing competition this week. We come back and Kairi Sane's in the ring to introduce Asuka for her championship celebration. Kairi runs through all the championships Asuka's won. Kairi also says that Asuka is a Grand Slam champion before playing the flute. As Kairi is playing the flute, Nia interrupts and says that there's nothing to celebrate and that she'll take the belt from Asuka. Asuka then attacks Nia. We then get a backstage interview with Corbin. Corbin says that he doesn't have any doubt that he can beat Drew. Corbin says that he will beat Drew and become champion. Back from break, we get R-Truth versus Bobby Lashley. We get a recap of Lashley attacking Truth last week. Truth says that he doesn't want Lashley to get even Nelson from The Simpsons. And just like his childhood hero, he won't give up and he warns Tom Brady, which he means Gronk, that he wants his 24/7 title back. After the match starts, Pretty Ricky shows up, taunts Lashley, but Lashley wins by submission with full Nelson. It was pretty much a squash match. Post-match, MVP gives Lashley a round of applause and Lana loses it backstage. Also backstage, Nia watches Kairi Sane and Asuka. Like, she was just standing there as they walked past and watching them. But up next is Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross defending the Women's Tag Championships against the Iconics. The Iconics come out and show what happened last week. They then say that they're grateful that Bliss and Cross are going to give them their titles back. The match then starts. It was a decent match. Bliss and Cross won by DQ after Peyton kept attacking Bliss while being the illegal woman. And then backstage, Kairi is playing a flute when Nia attacks her from behind. Also backstage, the Iconics are arguing, which ends when Billie Kay slaps Peyton Royce before they both cry and hug, which was pretty funny. We then have a look at what happened last week in the match between Baszler and Natalya. Then backstage, Asuka's checking on Kairi and storms off to find Nia. Nia is walking around backstage when Asuka finds her, and as Nia walks away, Asuka attacks her. We then get Shayna Baszler versus Natalya in a submission match. Apparently, there are no rope breaks in a submission match, even though there are. I don't know. I think they just sort of went, this rule doesn't exist anymore because we need it to not exist. So I don't know, it was weird. It was an okay match anyway. Wasn't very good, it was just okay. Baszler won with Kira through the clutch. Post-match, Natalya throws another tantrum as the crew was setting up for the KO show, and Natalya wrecks some of the set. We then have a look at what happened last week between Vega, Andrade, Garza, and Theory. Backstage, Garza, Andrade, and Theory are arguing again when Vega shows up and says enough's enough. And then we get the Kevin Owens show, and Kevin Owens' guests are Zelina Vega, Andrade, Angel Garza, and Austin Theory. Vega says everything is fine. Owens says he has one more guest, and it's Apollo Crews, who attacks Andrade. Then we go to break, and when we come back, we get Owens and Crews versus Andrade and Angel Garza. It was a decent match. Owens and Crews won after Crews sent Garza into Theory, who was up in the apron, and then hit the toss powerbomb for the pin. Post-match, Andrade and Garza attack Theory. Drew McIntyre then has a backstage interview and he says that he versus Corbin is his dream match. He also says that he is a terrible human being but a dangerous competitor. He also says he has a Claymore fit for a king. We then see the final preparations for the Street Profits Viking Raiders Axe Throwing competition. And then we get Murphy with Rollins versus Black. Rollins recruits Theory during the match, and as Black is about to hit Black Mass on Murphy, Theory attacks Black and causes the DQ. It was a decent match. Then we get the axe throwing contest between the Profits and Raiders. Rules are that each team gets 10 axes, so 5 each, and only bullseyes score points. The Raiders win 10-1 at the end of the segment, the cop shot, because one of the Profits' axes went through the windscreen of their cop car. The Profits also showed that they let the Viking Raiders win by starting to actually hit bullseyes. Backstage interview with Cruz next. He says that next week he's challenging for the US title. Zelina Vega shows up and says that Cruz could not do the match, and yeah, that's right. He could not do the match and look to fight another day, or he could do the match and never fight again. Cruz says he's going to beat Andrade for the belt next week. We then cut back to the Cops, who say that they're going to let the Profits and the Viking Raiders off with a warning because the female cop says that I've asked you. We then get the main event, and it's Drew McIntyre versus King Corbin. Before the match starts, Lashley comes out, and MVP says that they have interest in this match, and Lashley says he's coming for the belt. So they just stand at the top of the ramp. They didn't actually get involved in the match, which was surprising. And they didn't get involved after the match either. But it was a good match. McIntyre won by pinfall after hitting the Claymore kick. All the matches, except for the main event, were very short. That's why they were all decent or okay or whatever. Like, they had so many backstage thingos that they didn't need to cut the matches shorter. They just needed to put more matches in, but they cut matches shorter and it harmed the product so much. Like, the matches turned pretty much into squash matches because they were so short with really nobody. Like, one person would get on the offensive and then win pretty much. But other than that, that's Raw, so we'll move on to AEW Dark. And this week's Dark is once again an hour and a half long. And it's also got 9 matches like last week. And yes, once again, I did try to transition to each match differently. So we'll see how I go this time. So to kick the show off, we get Danny Jordan versus Hikaru Shida. It was a good match. Shida won by pinfall after hitting the Falcon Arrow. Next is Clutch Adams versus QT Marshall. It was a decent match. QT won by pinfall with the QT cutter. Up next is Jason Cade versus Marco Stunt. It was a good match. Pretty hard hitting actually. And Marco won by pinfall with the 450 splash. Marco got busted open off of an elbow, I believe it was. After that, we have Musa and Lee Johnston, whatever it is, versus Kip Sabian and Jimmy Havoc with Penelope Ford. It was a pretty good match. Havoc and Sabian won by pinfall after Havoc hit the Fisherman's DDT for 3 count on Johnston. We now get Sean Dean versus Phoenix. Very good fast-paced match. Phoenix wins with the spinning muscle buster thing that he does. Then it's John Cruz versus Luther. It was a decent match. Luther is weird as shit. But Luther did end up winning by submission after locking in the camel clutch and fish hooking the eyes. That's followed by Ryan Rembrandt and Mike Reed versus Private Party. It was a good match. Private Party won by pinfall after Orange Cassidy hit a senton and Tomiko for the pin on Rembrandt. Not Orange Cassidy. Isaiah Cassidy. I thought I'd said that wrong. We then get Alan Angels versus Sammy Guevara. It was a pretty good match. Guevara won by pinfall after hitting the GTH, which is apparently go to hospital, but I think it's actually the go to hell. Main event time, and it's Serpentico versus Darby Allin. Good match. Darby won by pinfall with the Last Supper. And we'll move on to AEW Dynamite now. The show starts with a video package running down the major matches on Double or Nothing. We then get to see the Inner Circle arrive in a limo before Alex Marvez shows up to interview them. They say that what they did to Vanguard 1 last week is nothing compared to what they're going to do to the Elite tonight. First match is 10 with Mr. Brody Lee versus Jon Moxley. Before the match, Brody cuts a promo saying he's just a man and the Dark Order are the lions of AEW. He also says that he needs to win at Double or Nothing to repay the loyalty of the Dark Order. He then also says that 10 is now a high knight of the Dark Order and now he needs to hurt Moxley. It was a decent match. Mox won by pinfall after hitting the Paradigm Shift. Post-match, Moxley put 10's arm in between a chair and he says that he doesn't know why Brody took his belt, but if Brody doesn't give it back in 10 seconds, he's going to break 10's arm. Brody Lee shows up on the Tron and says that if he wants his belt back, all he had to do is ask. But now it's personal and he's going to leave. Then Mox concertos the arm of 10, which was inside one chair. Up next is MJF with Wardlow versus Marco Stunt. Good fun match. MJF won by submission with the Salt of the Earth Fujiwara armbar. Post match, MJF gets on the mic and says that Marco lasted longer than anyone thought, and Wardlow holds Marco up so that MJF can punch him with the ring on. Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy come down and MJF and Wardlow leave. We then see what happened last week between Lance Archer and Cody. Jake Roberts is out next for his face-to-face with Arn Anderson. Jake says that Archer has destroyed everyone and Cody has weaseled his way into a match with someone he's trying to avoid. Arn then says that Jake is evil, but now evil has a killing machine. Roberts says that he will fight Arn any place, any time. Arn declines it and starts talking about Mike Tyson. Arn says that Tyson's going to be able to do anything he wants. Jake Roberts says that he promised first shot at Tyson to Archer, who wants to knock him out for fun, because he can. Arn says Cody said he needs to win. Arn also says that he's going to shove Jake Roberts' head up his ass. We then get a video package for Darby Allin. We also get a video package with Pac. Pac says that Orange Cassidy is marked by Death Triangle. We then get Orange Cassidy vs Phoenix. During Orange's entrance, Phoenix tries to take his head off, but he just walks out of the way. It was a great fun match. Phoenix won by pinfall after hitting a low blow and a cutter for 3. At the end of the match, Kip Sabian came down with a ladder and sat on top of it, which distracted Orange Cassidy and the ref, which allowed for the low blow. Post-match, SCU came out and dumped Kip off the ladder. Havoc then attacked them, starting a brawl. Colt Cabana showed up, then the best friends helped Cassidy fly over the ropes. Technically, Orange stood tall at the end of the brawl with that. Phoenix also injured himself during that brawl when he went to do a flip off the top rope. He did it, but didn't go far enough onto everyone, just landed straight on the ground. We then get Chris Statlander and Hikaru Shida versus Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, and Nyla Rose. Before the bell, Nyla and Shida wrestle over the kendo stick and they hit Britt with it before Shida and Statlander go after Nyla. The match starts when Britt leaves the ring. Statlander does as well. During the match, Britt refuses to tag in while Statlander's in the ring. Britt also suffered a knee injury. They haven't come out and said what exactly the injury is, but it appears they think it might be a torn ACL. That was when Statlander and Shida did it was a double arm drag thing, like when one's sitting in the corner and they flipped the other one on top of them. They did that to Nyla, but she landed on Britt's knee, so yeah. But it was a decent match. Nyla and Bacon won after Nyla hit the Beast Bomb on Shida for the 3. Post-match, Nyla tries to splash Shida through a table, but Statlander stops it and allows Shida to superplex Nyla through the table instead. Alex Marvez then interviews Mox. Mox says that everything results in violence and everything gets worse from here. He also says that he's going to beat Mr. Brody at Double or Nothing. We then get Shawn Spears news, which is his new segment, I guess. I don't know. But Spears says that Dustin Rhodes retires. Spears also says that retiring is a hard pill to swallow, although 12 years ago, pills were very easy for Dustin to swallow. But in much sadder news, Spears doesn't have a match at Double or Nothing, so he challenges Dustin Rhodes. He also says that to find Dustin, look for him in a museum. The commentators then run down the card for Double or Nothing. Sammy Guevara and Matt Hardy then have a co-promo where they talk about what's happened over the past few weeks. And it's main event time, which is Sammy Guevara versus Matt Hardy. Pretty good match. Matt Hardy won by pinfall after hitting a third Twisted Fate. Post-match, Matt gets a chair, and as he goes to use it, Jericho shows up on a Tron, and he hits Omega with Floyd. And then the Bucks show up. Matt also makes his way to where this is taking place. Matt Jackson, injures himself when they showed up. They think that he might have broken ribs, but yeah. Hangman Page also shows up to try and even the odds. The show ends with the Inner Circle leaving the battlefield and Matt and the Elite stand tall, although Hangman Page does leave. We'll then go to NXT, and before the show begins, we get a graphic saying that Shad Gaspard is dead. The show then starts with Karrion Kross with Scarlett versus Liam Gray. It was a squash match. Kross won by submission with the Kross jacket. After the match, Ciampa comes out and officially introduces himself and says that NXT is his home. Ciampa says that everything about Kross is special, and as Ciampa gets in the ring, Scarlett holds the rope down for him. Ciampa then says that he is special and says that at TakeOver it's going to be Ciampa versus Kross, and that match will be special before welcoming Kross to the main event and leaves. We then get an interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament match between El Hijo del Fantasma and Akira Tozawa. It was a pretty good match. Fantasma won by pinfall after hitting the Fairman driver. This puts him in the finals of the interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament. We then look at what happened last week between Riddle and Thatcher, including Imperium winning the tag titles. Thatcher has a backstage promo where he says that he wants another match where the only way to win is submission or KO, and Riddle can pick the place. Back from break, we get a video package for Shotzi Blackheart, and then after that we get Mia Yim versus Santana Garrett. It was an okay match. Mia Yim won by pinfall after hitting the protected neck. Gargano and Candice come out after the match, and Candice says she should have got the opportunity against Charlotte. and if she had, she wouldn't have got the ball. Candice and Johnny then go after Mia Yim, but Keith Lee came out and ran Candice and Johnny off. We then get a look at what happened last week between Bella and Grimes. Grimes then has a promo where he says he beat Bella pretty much. We then get a backstage interview with Drake Maverick. Maverick says that he has got to win, but Kushida is the best in the world, but he still believes that he can win. After that, we get Roderick Strong, he's accompanied by Bobby Fish and Adam Cole, versus Dexter Lumis. During Roddy's entrance, Cole and Fish go to the back. It was a good match. Strong won by pinfall after getting Lumis in a roll-up sort of thing when Lumis had tried to reverse the stronghold. Post-match, Lumis locks in his finisher and the other members of the Era come out and start kicking him, but it doesn't faze him at all. Dream comes out, takes out Fish, and Cole then taunts the Era before hitting the Purple Rainmaker on Cole. He goes from the top rope over the barricade, it was cool. We then get shown that Tozawa got attacked by the kidnappers after talking to Phantasma in the parking lot, but Phantasma ran them off. We then get the Britain Brawlers versus Everrise. It was a squash match. Britain Brawlers won by submission, and Lorcan locked in the single leg Boston Crab, and Birch locked in the crossface. Lorcan was the legal man. Not sure who he had the single leg on, but yeah, that one. We then get some tweets between Dakota Kai and Tegan Knox. Keith Lee then has a backstage interview and says that he has a problem with Gargano, and he's going to take him to the limit at TakeOver. Matt Riddle then answers Timothy Thatcher's challenge, and he accepts and says that he wants to do it in a steel cage. We then get an interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament match between Kushida and Drake Maverick. During the match, Jake Atlas comes down the ringside. The match was great. Maverick won by pinfall after turning the armbar into a pin. Post-match, Byron Saxton says that Regal said next week we'll get a triple threat match between Atlas, Maverick, and Kushida because they're all tied, and I do believe that Kushida beat Atlas, Atlas beat Maverick, Maverick beat Kushida, so it's not like they were tied and one of them had lost, whatever. You know what I mean. We then get a recap of everything that's happening in the NXT Women's Championship scene since Mania. Damian Priest is now on, and he says he's going to beat Balor at TakeOver. And it's the main event time, and it's Io Shirai versus Rhea Ripley. Charlotte came out at the end of the match, but got taken out shortly after when Io hit a Hurricanrana on Ripley that sent her into Charlotte. It was a good match. The match was called off after Charlotte hit a big boot on Io and a spear on Ripley. Charlotte held the belt high to close the show. So we'll move on to NXT UK. And this week's NXT UK is about the rivalry between Kaylee Ray, Piper Niven, and Toni Storm. There's no new NXT UK on at the moment, so we'll move straight on to SmackDown. And the show starts with a tribute to the US Army. We properly kick off with Dirt Sheet, who talk about Otis and Braun before showing us all of Bray's puppets that didn't make the cut. And as they're going through them, Braun interrupts. Braun and Miz talk about Bray, and Morrison challenges Braun to a match on Miz's behalf. While Miz tries to tell him not to, Braun accepts the challenge. We then get Braun versus Miz with Morrison. During the match, Miz distracts the ref. Morrison hits a flying kick from the barricade. It was a decent match. Strowman won by pinfall after hitting the running power slam. Post-match, Morrison says that at Backlash they will challenge Braun to a 2-on-1 Universal Championship match, which Braun also accepts. Up next is a first round match in the Intercontinental Championship tournament between Shinsuke Nakamura and AJ Styles. It's announced that Styles has been traded to SmackDown for future considerations. So in other words, Raw's going to say, we want this person, and they'll have to say yes. It was a really good match, very back and forth. They hit each other with everything except Nakamura did hit a Kinshasa, but Styles ended up winning after hitting the phenomenal forearm. We then get to see what happened last week between Charlotte, Bayley and Sasha. Backstage, Bayley tells Sasha to stay in the back for a match against Charlotte. We then get Bayley versus Charlotte. It was a good match. Bayley won by pinfall with the schoolgirl, but she did have to hold the ropes. Backstage, Bayley celebrates with Sasha. We then get Sonya Deville and Dolph Ziggler versus Otis and Mandy. Decent match. Sonya and Ziggler won by pinfall after Sonya hits a knee to the back of the head of a kneeling Mandy Rose. Post-match, Ziggler hits a super kick on Otis. Backstage, Jeff Hardy says that he's going to beat the Intercontinental Championship. We then get a graphic saying that Shad has died. Then the Forgotten Sons cut a promo saying that they're coming for blood. We then get a recap of what happened at the start of the show between Miz, Morrison and Strowman. And the commentators confirmed that we are getting the 2-on-1 match at Backlash. After that, we get an interview with Miz and Morrison, who are arguing before the interview. They say that they're going to win the belt. Main event time, and it's first round match in the Intercontinental Championship tournament between Jeff Hardy and Sheamus. Before the match, we get a promo showing the rivalry between Jeff and Sheamus. It was a good match. Jeff Hardy won by pinfall after reversing the White Noise into a roll-up. We'll move on to 205 Live. And to kick 205 Live off, we get the Britain Brawlers vs Everrise. And it was a rematch from NXT. But it was a really good match, this one. It wasn't a squash match. Lorcan and Birch ended up winning by submission when Birch locked in the crossface on one member of Everrise and the other one came in to break it up, but Lorcan got him in a single leg Boston Crab and they both tapped out, so that mirrored the ending of the NXT match, but they were like the roles were reversed. We then get a recap of what happened on NXT in the Interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament. After that, we see what Swerve said on NXT a couple of weeks ago. We also see Nice attacking Swerve before his match with Gallagher. And we also see the end of the Swerve Gallagher match. And now it's the main event, and it's Swerve versus Tyler Breeze. Great match. Swerve won by pinfall after hitting the confidence boost. I would go into AEW Double or Nothing, but I'll leave that to next week. I have seen the buy-in, but haven't seen the actual show. So next week we will start with AEW Double or Nothing. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Hopefully Cole will be back soon. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.